Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny.
How are you?
Good. I've got to move my deal here.
There's always some kind of, little thing we've got to do there at the end.
Yeah.
As we start, there's always some kind of little issue going on there.
It's off a little bit.
So we have kind of an interesting topic for this morning, don't we?
Yeah, and I think it's very important that we really start addressing these things on a continuous basis, especially the ones we have personal experience in that we've helped parents with ourselves.
Yeah. No. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah.
Though let me say this. So I'm going to pull in some articles that I've used to actually get from where I've gotten my information on this, because I haven't been able to find the OSBI charging documents or anything like that. So just know right from the beginning that this isn't like, I don't have immediate knowledge of these things. All I have is what's out on the internet in what we call our news media.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm sorry, what?
Well, I was just going to say, this is just kind of the summary level, tip of the iceberg. These things are going on. We're going to talk about them. We're going to go in depth with what we know, but we are going to do a deep dive into some of these once we're able to.
Yeah. And that's another thing that we have to say before we start off, really just jump into any of this stuff. Really all we can report at this point in time is what is out in the public square so far. So we're just doing the best that we can with what we have. And what I think we should do is let's just start with Ringling Let's hit that one first. And I'm going to maybe my my windows this morning are kind of being a problem for me. So, and I haven't quite figured that out, stinky thing. So, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and I'm going to pull in the article that I was reading from. So here's the article that I read from this morning. It was from the Oklahoman. It was, it was not a small article. There you go. So you get the idea. It was a pretty, in-depth article. They took quite a bit of time to really talk about, these things. And I just want to say this too. So my husband played football from the time he could put so he was like playing peewee football. And he played as a high school student. He played at Dell City. And, that was the early 80s. And Dell City was quite a powerhouse for football. And they won national champions and championships and that kind of thing. So it's not like my husband wasn't exposed to this kind of stuff. And Michael, you said the same thing about you.
Yeah. Well, there's always been that ethos in the football locker room where things could get a little aggressive and things can happen. And that's just kind of how it's always been. There's always been some aspect to the older guys kind of picking on the younger guys, but never, I never saw or experienced anything to the level of like what happened at Kingfisher.
Well, and so this morning I read some of the stuff out of the Ringling report, but that I've got up on the screen right now from the Oklahoman, and I read some of this to stuff to Dave this morning, and I'm like, just tell me kind of what was going. He told me that when this was peewee football. So when he was doing peewee football, he had a coach and like if they didn't run plays right, or if they were being lazy or something like that, he'd make them crawl, around, like do the crawl, around.
Bear crawl.
And he was like, I hated that because there were goats heads out there. And I'd go back to the car and I'd be like, Dad, I hate football. I just want to quit. This is stupid. And his dad would always go, I loved his dad. He was so funny. And his dad would always go, well, when it's quitting season, I'll let you know.
Yeah, that's funny.
And, that wasn't okay. So you got some stickers. I'm sure he didn't even know that there were stickers out there, whatever. And he said that later on, if you best a play or something like in middle school, they'd make you run the field, or, they'd make you do up downs. You'd have to get down, on the ground and do a bunch of push-ups, and, he'd say however many that was. So he said they would get up in his face, like at the high school level, they'd get up in his face and grab his face mask, and just scream at him and do this. And he also said too, like his Dell City coach, man, if they were losing going into the locker room at halftime, there was like, he'd throw his clipboard and he'd yell and he'd scream and he'd carry on. But here's what Dave did say. Dave said that never one time in any of his coaches throughout he didn't go on to play college ball. He just played in high school. And he said never in his 12 years of playing college ball, and he was also a wrestler too in high school, he never had a coach who screamed obscenities at him. There was never anything sexual. They would flip towels at each other in the shower and stuff like that. That's fairly normal stuff. That's not really abnormal stuff. So I just wanted to put that out there before we even start talking about some of this stuff, because I think we've literally come to a point in our society today where if some coach screams at a kid, there's a parent out there that's going to have a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
You can't scream at my child. What are you doing screaming at my child? Well, if you don't want your kid to be screamed at, don't put him in a sport.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Well,
That's
and
one of the things in a coach's bag of tricks. Shoot, I coached softball, girls softball in middle school, and I screamed at those girls. What are you thinking? What are you doing out there? And guess what? When I was coaching, there were at least 3 parents out there saying way worse than I was, like screaming obscenities and carrying on. When I played hockey, it was the same way. You'd see these parents come to watch their kids playing hockey, and I had one guy who I was standing there, he was screaming at his kid. This was like maybe 5th grade, middle school hockey. He's calling him a dumb effer and, stuff like this. So I've heard parents do all kinds of crazy stuff. And on both ends of the spectrum, on one, oh, you can't scream at my kid. And then the other one is, I'm in the stands telling my kid, screaming out loud for everybody else to hear, that he's a dumb MFer.
yeah.
So, I've seen the whole spectrum here, and I just thought it was important to bring that up before we really started talking. But I've talked over you like 3 times, so go.
Well, what I was going to say is, I played, Pee Wee football, middle school football, high school football. My dad played college football. Football is a violent sport. We all know that, things happen, but there's a little nuance here that I think a lot of people forget about. There is motivation. Football coaches have to motivate players, and they do it in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it's just through, you messed up, go run the field for a half hour. Too bad. You're going to learn in some capacity. But there's a line between motivation and abuse. And
I completely concur.
Yeah. And at some point, these coaches completely blur that line, and they get so caught up in the whole aspect and ethos of their program. This is they're like the god in the little town. They just have that complex. They're untouchable. The school districts do not hold them accountable. The administrators don't hold them accountable. As long as you're winning or as long as you're producing results, people look the other way, and that's the problem that we have. It's still abuse, no matter how you cut it, no matter what the guy's results are, in any capacity, in any program, whatever it is. You could pick high school all the way up to college, NFL, whatever. These things take place on a consistent basis, and they are atrocious at Kingfisher.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to pull the trigger on these people, because these people, in my opinion, Jenni, these people that are kind of at this serial level where it's just not a single incident that's maybe happened once or twice. This is something that goes back over 10 or 15 years. This is how they, this is how they run their programs.
Right.
Those people are serial abusers. Those people have no business being around kids. And they're there for that reason. They're on power trips. They like being in those positions. They like putting these boys and girls in these compromised positions. It's powerful for them. So I have no love lost for any of these coaches, because I've said it before, these predators that prey on kids, they're going to be in the school system in some capacity, because that's where the access to these kids are.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Ringling first.
Yeah.
So I read this whole article, and again, this was put up by the Oklahoman, and you and I have talked about where we get our news and what difference it makes where you get your news and that kind of thing. We've done that for a long time. So I'm going to say this. If you don't know, the Oklahoman tends to be a little bit more liberal. And so I always read everything. I want to know where my information is coming from. And then I read based on, on that. So I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I'm also, looking at buzzwords and things like that. So I read through this whole article, and I did it this morning just to make sure it was fresh in my mind before we went on, because I didn't want to have to go, oh, and I don't remember this. So I read it this morning just to make sure it was fresh in my mind. And it's about this coach. His name is Phil Coons, and there have been, apparently he was there, he had kind of a controversial background. There was the school that had hired him previously. There had been some complaints, and so there were some parents who were concerned about it. But then also too, this guy had been named to the Oklahoma Coaches Hall of Fame as well. So, and here's something that you touched on just a second ago, but I want to kind of bring it a little bit more out here. Coons, they also hired him, Coons, the coach, as junior high and high school principal, and then brought on his wife and his 4 oldest children as teachers and coaches. Well, there is a law basically against that, but they waive it for certain schools of certain sizes because of the fact that the small schools say, well, if we don't hire, these people, then we're not going to have anybody that we can hire. And I don't know if it was waived for Ringling or not. I'll just be honest, I didn't go out and check. But I'm just saying that there is a law against nepotism. You're not supposed to hire. It happened here in Luther, superintendent ago. We hired a superintendent, and then they're making 6 figures. And then he hires his wife to do something that nobody could ever figure out what she was doing. And she was making nearly 6 figures. So there is a bad problem with that in small towns. And that kind of jumped out at me when I was reading about that. Ringling has a population of 862 people, which is even smaller than where I live. And his wife was the high school counselor. So she was hired as the high school counselor. Ringling has always had a big football program, and they've always been kind of winners. And so that was kind of an issue for people. I mean, when you look at the picture that they put on the front page of this, on the very top of the article, I mean, you can obviously tell Ringling is interested in winning. And I do want to say this right now. I want sports taken out of public schools altogether. I mean, I'm sorry, but I do. I want them completely removed from public school, because what's happened is over time, it's become, number one, a money sink. Number two, it's become problematic in numerous different ways. And number three, and by problematic, I mean in terms of what we're talking about, right now, because this is kind of a widespread thing. But then also, too, you have schools out there indebting the property of their community to build stadiums, to build millions and millions of dollars worth of stadiums. What does that have to do with a kid learning math? What does that have to do with a kid learning English? We have a majority of kids in Oklahoma today that can't read on grade level or do math at grade level. Yeah. And yet we're indebting people's property for millions of dollars for a sport. I'm at this point, I'm completely against it. Obviously, I was a homeschooler. My kids played sports. They did it in private organizations. Let private organizations come up and take care of that. Let parents have to put the money in to pay for their kid to do blah. And if your kid can't afford it, or if you can't afford it, that's the way it is. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. I'm so tired of that too. I mean, it's all the socialist gambit of, well, we have to pay attention to those people who, can't afford everything, and we've got to bring everything down to their level. No, we quit having people come up to the level. I mean, that was what America used to be, is, we used to strive. We don't strive now. We just pull everything down to the lowest common denominator and say, well, it's because they're poor. I'm done with that. So I'll just tell you, I have a really bad taste in my mouth about public school sports, and you guys can write me all the nasty emails you want. It's not going to make me change my mind. I don't really care. I honestly think that once sports as a rule are out of the public school system and we just go back to focusing on oh, and there's the other argument too, where parents say, well, that's the only way I get my kid to do anything, is that they're threatened for not being on the team if they can't keep up with their work. Please don't tell me that's an argument, because that's an insane argument.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but it's an insane argument. That kid needs to do their work, period. And if you have to hold a carrot over them, find another carrot, but that's not the carrot to use. I mean, honestly, it just frustrates me to the depths of my soul, because I've literally had, over my 10-year teaching career, I've literally had parents come to me and say the following, and I'm not lying. Look me in the eye. Well, I'm not really worried about what he's getting at school right now because he's going to be a professional basketball player. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe. But guess what? The cards are stacked against him on that, but getting a job in the, out in the real world is, he can probably manage that. So let's think about this. So I would literally have parents who would say that to me. And you look at college, my dad taught at OU for numerous years. It's the same way in college. So long as they're playing on the team and they're doing a great job, it's like, we don't really care what you're learning, because, hey, you're playing ball and you're doing great. I mean, we're now at the point where we're like Rome, and all we really care about is going to the Coliseum and watching the Christians getting taken care of by the lions. And that's it's all bread and circuses. Yeah. We're not focusing on what's the right thing and what's best for kids in the first place. What's best for kids in the first place isn't to have some parent going, oh, don't worry about your education, because you'll be a big baller at the end of this. You'll be great. And you're like, really?
Yeah.
How do you function in the real world with that thought process? And not only that, but I was bullied by parents when I was teaching at Deer Creek. I was bullied by parents whose kids were falling off of the eligibility list because of one of my classes. I get bullied by parents. What do you mean? What do we have to do to keep him on the eligibility list? What do we have to do? Why are you bullying me? Maybe you should just make sure your kids are doing their work. So I've got I'll just be upfront about it. I've got kind of a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. From being in public school. At this point in time, there was probably a point in time, Jenni, where I would disagree with you. But at this point in time, I'm not going to say that I don't disagree with you or anything. But what I'm going to say is, and I think this is paramount when we start talking about Kingfisher, when you have a coach in a public school program, a lot of times these coaches are untouchable. I mean, we've seen it multiple times. I've helped parents personally with issues like one we're going to talk about with Newcastle. But these coaches get in these systems in these smaller towns, smaller communities, and they're literally untouchable. Yeah. And that's allowed because of the public school system, because you have a weak school board, you have weak administrators. And here's the biggest thing, Jenni. What do you see from all these school districts? Oh, we're here to protect these kids. Our number one priority is to protect these kids at all costs. I mean, you want to talk about an absolute.
Well, that's only if they're transgender, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. But you want to talk about a slap in the face when you look at in Kingfisher. It's only come out because you've got a strong parent who's brought it to light at the legal level. We're going to even talk about that, because if he didn't do what he did legally, which the school district, basically the principal, the administrator said, hey, if you want this to come out, you're basically going to have to sue us. That's how concerned about the protection of these kids these school districts are. If you want this to come out, you're going to have to sue us.
Right.
And that's
so let's finish up with let's finish up with Ringling. So after reading this whole article, and again, you guys can go look this up for yourself and decide what decide what you think. It's, if you don't agree with me, I've never, tried to demonize people who don't agree with me. You've got your own opinion. But I think after reading this article particularly, and then after talking to my husband about it, I tend to believe that what's going on here in Ringling is that you've got a winning coach who said some things he shouldn't say. And I'm going to reiterate what my husband said. He said, "Hey, I've been grabbed in the face mask and, that, and yelled at, but my coach never used profanity. He never called me names. He might have said, 'Get your lazy butt out there,' or something like that. But, nothing like, he didn't call him a P word, because that's in this particular article. They accuse this coach of calling boys the P word. And I don't like that. I don't think that's nice. I mean, I get it that you're trying to toughen them up, but I don't think you toughen people up by calling them, I don't think that's okay.
Well, that
So,
could be a compliment to some of these.
But here's the thing: if that had been an issue and the guy was like out of bounds, talking like, he should have been brought before the school board, or the school board should have, gone to him, however they wanted to, work it legally, whatever's legal, and said, "Dude, you can't talk to kids like that. You do that again and you're out of here, because we're not going to use that kind of language." Now, there was this, there was a story that was told in the article about a family who lives just adjacent to the football field. And they would sit out on their porch, and I guess they were doing it to watch the practices. I don't know. It was so loud. All the screaming was so loud that I couldn't stand it. And we just couldn't even I had to get a radio. So, okay, really? I mean, what does screaming do? I mean, screaming is screaming. It's not, so long as you're not hitting a kid or you're not calling them nasty names while you're screaming at them. So you're screaming at them, "Hey, move it. Get down the field. Get down the field." Are you kidding? You can't say stuff like that. Well, if you don't like that, and that's just too much for your kid shouldn't be in sports.
Yeah.
I mean, for Pete's sakes, I played women's hockey for 2 years. You want to know how I got yelled at by my hockey coach? And we weren't kids, so I'm not trying to say, I'm just saying coaches yell, and they're going to yell at women too. I mean, they just yell. It's what they do. So that just annoyed me, because I thought, okay, well, there's a difference between, and then I got to thinking about this too. So if you've got one family or group or whatever, and they're going, the coach is yelling at the kids. Well, that's almost, there's really no comparison. I'm sorry, but there's no comparison between my coach is yelling at my kids and my coach is allowing sexual abuse to take place. Yeah. That's not on the same level at all. So then how does a school board deal with that without then saying that they're ignoring the parents? So I guess you just have to say, look, guys, and you just have to treat them like they're children, I guess, and say, look, guys, every coach is going to scream. So, if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you need to take your kids someplace else. But then if on the other hand, there's sexual abuse or crazy crap happening, like we're going to talk about in Kingfisher, then you do, then it's managed a different way. But I just did not, from reading this article, I just didn't come out with anything that I thought was really horrible here, other than a coach who, like, here you can see right here, one boy missed a team event. Other players said Coon called the boy a P word. Another boy was late on a different day. He said Coon called him a piece of poop, who would never amount to anything. Okay, well, I don't agree with that. But that's just amounts to, hey, don't do that, coach. I mean, stop. So anyway, that was just my thought after I read it. If you guys have read it and you want to put, I mean, we got plenty of people watching this morning. We've got the comments up. If you want to comment, we never keep people from commenting. You just can't be, can't use nasty words or, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I felt about that one. I just thought, well, I think there's a saying, and I'm going to pull this up really fast just because I want to make this point. So hang on one second.
Well, and there again, like I said, there's a line between motivation, and different coaches are going to have different ways to do that, and then actual abuse.
Yeah. So, no, okay. So with that being said, let me pull up our next article. So give me a second. It takes a second to get all of these. Screen sharing isn't always the easiest thing. It takes a little bit. Okay, so here is the I'm going to reload this page because they have a video that shows up at the top of the page when you reload it. That's basically a video that's associated with the article. So give it just a second to pull up here. Okay, so watch in your upper corner here. Okay, so while you're watching, this was a video that was sent in by a parent. This is from 2018. This is the article that I read this morning. So if you want to follow along, or if you want to, do whatever, please feel free to do that. This is where I got my information. Michael, you're going to talk about something different here in a second, a little different information. Basically, the bottom line is this, that this video is coming from something that is called The Ring. And apparently the Ring has been a thing. The Ring has been a thing. Oh my gosh, I sound like Dr. Seuss. It's been in Kingfisher for a number of years. And so what they do is, and apparently the coaches have allowed this to happen, and even an assistant coach is accused of getting into the ring with one of the kids and wrestling him and making him tap out. Yeah. I mean, to the point where he had to tap out. Yeah. So you can just continue to see some of the stuff on your screen here from the video from K4. And that's just stupid. And you can talk about that here in a second. Yeah. But I want to hit one thing specifically, and then Michael, I'm going to let you kind of take over on that article because you have some more information. But there was a part in this particular article where they talk about, if you don't like to hear nasty stuff, just put your fingers in your ears for a second and until we can get past this spot. But there's a thing, a hazing, a type of hazing called brooming. And it's literally when guys hold down another guy and jam their testicles in their face. And it's frankly disgusting and horrifying. And I just don't even know how to. And I asked my husband about that. I said, "You never did anything like this. There was nothing." He goes, "Oh my God, no, not in my football programs. But I will tell you this. There were rumors that circulated around when I was in high school ball that wrestlers did that." Well, so you're talking about the early 80s here. So, it's kind of like you said early on, about the fact that, I'm going to put this on pause a second, about the fact that there's always been some kind of hazing in sports. It's actually been it's like frats, the same thing. And I'm not excusing it. So don't start writing and saying, you're crazy. And I'm not excusing that. That's not what I'm saying. It's not okay. But I'm just saying it's nothing new. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Okay,
Well,
Michael, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you talk.
well,
more
there just for a point of clarification on the dropping your testicles. That's usually that's called teabagging. Brooming, on the other hand, I mean, brooming is actually like that's the sexual abuse of actually, brooming someone by, shoving that,
Okay. I think we all get
Okay.
it. We're done with
So,
that thing.
so that's,
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I didn't even
yeah.
realize that. So that's
that's
disgusting. And I'm super unhappy about that. Okay. Let's move on.
well,
Oh my gosh. Now I'm going to have to wash my brain now.
well,
Help me.
one thing I want to kind of address is, they charged the father, they showed the father, Mr. Mecklenburg, in that video there with the charging him with child neglect.
Right.
So, in my opinion, all these things go back to it goes back to the coach, but it goes back to the school board and it goes back to the principal. Because if you look through time at this whole situation, Mecklenburg, he met with the coach back in 2018. He met with the coach again in 2019. He met with the superintendent and the high school principal and the athletic director. He met with the superintendent a second time. He met with the board member. He met with another board member.
Yeah.
He met with another board member. He had,
and that goes all the way back to when, like 2017 or 16 or something. How long?
Those time frames, that was probably maybe 2019, 2020.
Oh, okay.
Maybe even 2021. But the point here is, and I want to make this real clear, the father met with the proper channel of people multiple times over years until they finally they just literally ignored everything up until that point, or just swept it under the rug. I don't know what they told him behind closed doors or whatever they were going to do. Obviously, it never stopped. It continued to get worse, progressively worse, especially for his son. But at the same time, they're the ones that lawyered up. They're the ones that went to legal. They stopped communicating with him, and they went to legal, and then he had to go get his own attorneys on multiple occasions, 2 separate occasions, just to get answers, to start trying to get some restraint put on a coach that has a clear, this coach has a clear history of abuse that goes back for a long, long time. So, when the DA over there is trying to turn this around on, I think, one of the school board members and on the father, I mean, that is that is an absolute complete joke of a DA. That's a bogus move. It's just completely political. I'm sure the guy's complete left-wing liberal maniac, just like all the supporters that look the other way. Because if they were there to protect kids, this thing, the second a father went to the administrator and nothing happened, when that father goes to a school board member, because that's our representatives, those school board members, that's right, our avenue into the check and balance in these. When there's no action taken by the school board in any capacity to even bring it up or whatever, when the school board's complicit in sweeping it under the rug, then you have major problems, and then it escalates. The school board allowed this to happen. I don't care what anybody says. The previous principal or the previous superintendent, whoever it was, they allowed this to happen. It's all happened under their watch. They're 10 times more guilty than you could ever say that father is for child neglect, when all he did was make attempt after attempt after attempt. And what are you supposed to do? You go to them, you say, hey, this is happening. Are you just supposed to immediately go over to the police department, or what? I mean, I'm sure they tell you, yeah, we're going to take care of it. We're going to find out, what's going on.
Right.
I mean,
we'll do our own internal investigation.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, that's
whatever.
what it always,
right.
what it always comes down to. So you look at this guy, the Coach Myers. I mean, he's got, prior to this incident even happening, he's got like upwards of 5 things that's happened in his past with the same type of assault by minor, where parents are going in and making complaints or trying to file reports or whatever. You've got other assaults. You've got other sexual assaults. You've got just the abuse of these kids checkered throughout this guy's past. And then you come to these guys like this, and it's pretty obvious that the district knows about a past like this in some capacity, and they still allow this guy to come into their program to continue to do this. I mean, after the first, if any responsible person after the first thing, you take it pretty serious. If there was ever another incident in any capacity, whether it's physical, mental abuse, sexual, whatever, verbal abuse at that kind of level, like what's been reported for this guy in the past, you would get rid of that guy. You'd make sure and mark his file for the future that this guy is a serial abuser of kids. And you'd make sure that he was never going to be able to be in a position again to go be in charge of any kind of program or classroom or have any kind of power over these kids.
Well, and I think, because I'm going to mention another thing here in just a second. We'll close out probably with our friend at V1SUT did another blog just recently about some abuse, and we'll talk about that just briefly as we close out, because she'll be on next week to talk about that. But I do want to point out the picture right here. I mean, you can see the marks on this kid. That's not a simple, playful, upperclassmen, underclassmen, simple little throw you in a trash can, type of deal. This is, and if you're a coach in a program and you even, let's say the coach didn't even know or see this or whatever, taking place. I'm sure they knew all about it in some capacity. But when the boy takes his shirt off the next day or is changing in the locker room, put his pads on, you don't pull him aside and say, hey, what all's happening here? That coach is 100% involved, on this. And that kind of begs a question too that hit me while you were just talking about this. I keep looking off because my screen's on another monitor over here. That it hit me as we were looking at this photo, as this, I paused it here on this video. There is a law basically in Oklahoma that says that if you're a teacher and you see anything that looks like a child is being physically abused, then it's up to you. You're bound by law to report that to the authorities. That is what it says in the law. And I'm not exactly sure where to go find it or anything, but it's there. Because I remember that from when I was teaching. You look at that photo and you think, under what set of circumstances has somebody seen that and then not reported that to authorities? So just from that standpoint, if that coach was seeing these kids, while they're in the, in the locker room, and he's seen that and he's not reported it to authorities, he's broken the law just for that, because there's no way. That's outrageous. Looking at those pictures, it just, man.
And here's another part of this. Okay, so this coach has created this ethos in this football program. Okay, it's a hazing that has gone on, for quite a while.
This is the dad,
that's
right?
The father right there. So he's created this hazing, history in the program. So you have the kids that were hazed and sexually abused and all this stuff happened to them when they were, freshmen and sophomore. They're the ones That's the exact same kids that suffer. They're the ones doing this, that are allowed to do this to the other kids. It's just a complete cycle of abuse. They're abused in the beginning, and then they're taken advantage of and abused in the end. And the coach is probably just sitting there laughing and, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Look what I've produced here in these kids. I mean, you want to talk about it, and I'm sure that, that's going to be that. I'm sure that testimony is going to be coming out in the OSBI investigation in one way or another. But that, I mean, that's how it happens. You've created that, and then what have you done? Because how amenable these kids are at this age. Now you've created that aspect of violence in a kid going forward. It's okay. I got away with it. I did this. I did that. And they got away with it. Yeah. But and there's multiple things here. I mean, we could just go on and on about everything. And like I said, we're going to do a deep dive on this with all the information, with everything. But you look back at that thing where all these schools have, their main.
Hold on one second. Let me get it cut. Sorry, I didn't realize there was audio. Well, go ahead.
Their main objective is to protect these kids.
Yeah.
They have all these policies in place. There's no weapons. You can't do this. You can't do that. Yet when it comes to these programs, I mean, there's a taser that was used on these boys. There's a PVC pipe that's called the rape stick. I mean, are you kidding me? Who named it that? The coach? The coach hands it over here to someone? I mean, is that what's happening? I mean, at some point, Jenni, I mean, this is all 100% perpetrated and allowed to happen by the adults in the room. And this is not just one. Where's all the rest of the coaching staff? Where's all the rest of these people there to protect these kids? Where's the administrators? Where's the athletic director? When you have parent, and this isn't just one parent that's come forward. There's parents, plural, in this deal. So when you have something like that, I mean, I don't know what is going through the mind of these school board members, because that is what they're there for. They're there to protect those kids in every capacity that's possible. So shame on me. I'll just say it. Shame, obviously the coach needs to go. The coach needs to go to prison, in my opinion. He's abused kids like no one's business. Anyone that's associated with that program that had any kind of knowledge, they're complicit in this deal. They're implicated, because they could have came forward. They could have said, hey, this is happening. This isn't right. I'm not going to be a part of this deal. I'm going to live by the standards and the morals of what it is to protect these kids. And no one did that, not from the lowest level of that program all the way up to the highest levels of the administrators and members of the school board.
Well, and again, this is the other reason why I think we should not have sports in public school, because and this is kind of an interesting thing. So this, you saw on the video a second that was up in the right-hand corner. Again, I'm on K4. That's where I'm getting this information. Dan, this is what you had said earlier. You just kind of alluded to it. So this, he said, I don't have time for this. If you want the truth to come out, you're going to have to sue us. That was Dan Craig, who was the second to the last superintendent. But that's another thing to point out about Kingfisher. How many superintendents has this school system had in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed to me like a minimum of 4.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That came out right there. That let's just shine a little light on that. That came out in the second meeting the parent had, back with the superintendent. So it was already that early on in the process where they're already backing off. They already know that there's major problems there. They already know that they're going to have to go the legal route. So they're just, here you go. You got these administrators disconnecting themselves and hiding behind their lawyers and saying, oh, hey, if you want this to come out, you're just going to have to sue us. I mean, you want to talk about someone that is not qualified to do the job right there.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that really just chaps my hide is the fact that if they have a winning program, if they're winning, games, if they're championship team, if whatever, they just literally pull up the rug, sweep all of it under, put it down, and move on. I mean, they're just not interested. And I think it goes back to money. You have people who literally move to school. I mean, if you've got a kid who's playing football, you have parents who will actually move to a district in order for that kid to be able to play ball at a specific school, right? So you have schools, superintendents, and probably board members who know that this is happening. And again, how do schools get appropriated? Butts in seats. So the more kids in their school, the more kids they get money for, the more money they get. So it to me, it's always, everything about public school has always been money over everything else. And then because sports bring in money, then sports over everything else. And then everything else is just whatever happens, happens. We don't really care that much. So long as we've got a winning football team, who cares if only half our kids can't read? And I'm sorry, but I completely, I've seen too much over the years to not believe that that's what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk, you said right there, let's just sweep it under the rug. So let's kind of expand on that in this right now. Okay. So this guy's been put on leave, I think.
Yes, he has been now.
Okay. So you've got a guy with a very, checkered past with all this stuff. There's been felony charges, criminal felony charges filed on the guy. You've got, he's been, I just have a list of things here. He's got Oklahoma State Department of Education investigation. He's got 2 law enforcement investigations for abuse of minor and enabling child abuse by injury. He's got, there have been kids, I'm not saying directly tied to him, but there have been kids come out of that program that did commit suicide. I'm not saying it's directly because of this guy, but they were in the system. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I'm just making it aware that things like that have happened to former players that have come out of there. There's been multiple sexual assaults that we know about with this guy.
One even on a bus. That was disgusting.
Yeah,
that was reported by K42, was one on a bus.
Yeah. Well, and here's another thing. There's been zero reporting of any of these things coming out of that staff, coming out of this guy, which he, like you said, you're required by law to report those kind of things happening. There's been multiple weapons over there. There's been the taser, there's a rape stick, there's all these things that they're using or being allowed to use to hurt these kids. They're allowed, he's seen the whippings and the beatings on these kids. Look the pictures of the boy alone. I mean, you look at those pictures and you're just like, whatever, and then there was the incident, like you said, where you've got the coach stepping in and tapping out a kid in the ring. Yeah. I mean, come on. How old, I mean, what does this guy have going on that he allows that to happen? And there's been other things. There's been death threats, in their threads. There's been intimidation, there's all that stuff. So I come back. Yeah. And we know this coach, I'm sure, uses unbelievable profanity, just demeaning these kids, calling them every name possible. So let's come back. You're going to put a guy like that on leave. You're not going to fire this guy, mark his record, So after he leaves Kingfisher because of this, he can just go coach somewhere else. I mean, are you kidding me? This
Well,
needs to,
but that brings up another thing that has to be dealt with, and I have no idea how you get this dealt with. We have schools literally who are keeping teachers in classrooms who absolutely are a risk to children because they're afraid to get sued for firing them.
yeah,
How does that work?
yeah,
How do we even say on one hand we're we're so concerned about the kids, we're very worried about the kids, and then on the other hand you go, well, I can't fire her, we'll get sued.
yeah,
Well, you're spending public schools like Stillwater Public Schools, you're spending tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars to fight a lawsuit to keep from apologizing to a man in your community for using police to escort him from a podium during open comment time because you didn't like what he was saying.
yeah.
So you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars for that, but yet you're afraid you're going to get sued. I'm not talking about Stillwater. I'm talking about I'm just making a general statement here. But some school would come forward and then say, I'm afraid I'm going to get sued if I fire them. I mean, I think there's such a disconnect with importance. What's important? I mean, you say one thing's important, but then you do something entirely different.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you fight that. The only way it makes sense to fight that is to get good people on school boards who aren't a bunch of people who have no backbone and can't speak out, and you hire these people, you elect them to your school board, and then those people then fight for the kids, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. But as you well know, we don't have that situation. We have people that aren't running for school board that would be good candidates. And then when you have people like Michael Grande, who are excellent candidates for school board, you won't go to the polls and vote for him. So he can't get in to stop the stuff that's going on. So, I think it was Sherry Conley, wasn't it, who said during our interview with her one time, hey, choice doesn't make any difference if you're not going to actually make those choices yourself, and you're going to let somebody else make them for you.
Yeah. Well, let me just recap a little bit. So I just named off, probably a dozen different things. Any one of those things would be literal grounds for dismissal. So you've got a guy that's been in this position, probably with a documented history, almost, 15 to 18 years of doing this stuff, still allowed to come in. So we go now we got to look at where the responsibility lies. You go to the school board. The school board didn't take any action on this deal until actual criminal charges were brought by the OSBI or some entity like that. And they had to see it with, depositions and all these different witness statements. I mean, are you kidding me? These people should all resign immediately. They're an absolute disgrace as school board members and as representatives of the people and as protectors of these kids, Jenni. They have no business in any capacity being in any kind of decision-making process that has to do with kids.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but where is the community? Well, I mean, it's like Sherry said, you would think that enough of the community members would come forward and just have a fit about it.
Yeah.
So where are these people?
Yeah. Well, and that's where I mean, I don't know. I mean, you have people that worship a program in some capacity, and what goes on behind closed doors doesn't matter as long as they're producing, that, oh, we're one of the best football programs in our class.
Right.
You cannot sacrifice these kids for that. And shame on the community. I mean, shame on all the people that turned their back on these parents that came out to say, hey, this is happening to our boys. This is happening in our locker room to our boys. Shame on them. Shame on the school board. Shame on the administrators This coach needs to never have another position coaching ever, anywhere. This needs to follow him. He needs to have, I'm not even going to say, but this thing, it just shows what is happening in that communities have no problem turning a blind eye, as long as they're getting, their bread and circus on the other side. They can go to the games, get some nachos, cheer for the boys. Doesn't matter how we got there.
It's funny because I have 2 boys and 3 girls. So the boys, both of them played baseball for a little bit, but they were just neither one of them have really been all that interested in sports. I think much to my husband's chagrin, as he and his buddies played, football all the way through life, essentially. But I did have, my oldest daughter was in band. And so she did play, in the band, and she would march during halftime with the band at her high school. And Dave and I would go. She was the oldest kid, and we didn't have any younger kids at the time. And we would go and watch her at the football games and watch her play, and it was fun. I mean, I look back on those days kind of fondly. We had a routine that we did, and it was just fun to go watch her, and watch the band. And our joke always was, that we came to watch the marching band and a football game broke out. That's what the geeky band parents would say.
Yeah.
But still in all, I do kind of understand that. And in small towns, Friday Night Lights, I mean, we've had television shows about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a huge part of the community.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, the reason why, and this will be the 3rd time, and I promise it'll be the last, because we're after an hour anyway now. And this will be the last. But this is why I say sports has got to be divested from public schools. And it's got to be something that parents do on their own. Because if this is becoming such a thing to where, and let me say this, a lot of parents put up with this stuff because they want their kid to get a scholarship to college. And they'll just go, well, can you stick it out? Because we know that you can get a scholarship if you'll stay with this. Can you, just stick it out? Well, that should never, no parent, no child should ever be put in that position. And when we were homeschooling, we knew of a family who had 2 kids who went to NCAA schools in the top tier playing baseball. And they were homeschooled, and they did that through homeschooled sports. So through private sports teams that were traveling teams, they got that done. So for people to say, hey, this just isn't a reality here, you can't make that happen, that's not the case at all. It's an absolute falsehood. So if what's important to us in this time period is how well our football teams do, I just don't see there's any fixing any of this. I mean, we're just going to hit bottom like an alcoholic. We're going to hit bottom and then wonder what the heck happened.
Yeah.
Well, we had our kids in school, public school, we had our kids in sports. I mean, it's just, we don't even know what we should be paying attention to at this point in time. And it really is, just for you parents who aren't sure, it's the fact that public schools should be educating children how to read, how to write, how to do mathematics, understanding science. The rest of any of this isn't necessary. It's simply not, no matter what you think. And until we decide that that's the way that we want to understand things work, we're going to get what we get, and you can't throw a fit.
Well, and think about this, Jenni, and I have personal experience with this, and I'll just give a little 1 or 2 minute explanation to validate this. Think of the amount of lies that were told to these parents And then what was actually said behind closed doors to these coaches or to these administrators or athletic director or however, I'm not going to say I know what these are, but I guarantee you these people are lying through their teeth to the parents and then back and forth as to what's happening or this or that. And as an example, this is a story that never made the news. You know, this was more in the middle school setting in Newcastle, where you had a parent with a child in sports that was having stuff like this happen to him, not the sexual part, but he was being bullied. And, you know, there was all kinds of issues happening with this child, where the parent simply was going in asking questions, say, hey, you know, what is happening? This is what this is my kids. So the parent was going through this process. He contacted us. He contacted me. We went in. We did a series of open record requests, got emails, got communications between the principal, the superintendent, the athletic director, the coach. And guess what? They were lying. They were all lying. They were lying to the parent. We caught them. We caught them red-handed. We turned the investigation. We filed a Department of Education investigation, just like in this case here. We caught him, and the superintendent wound up, you know, I'm not going to say directly because of what we did, but the superintendent stepped down. They're still looking into that case in one way, but we caught them red-handed, you know, but we had to do it. They didn't have enough morals. They didn't have enough character to even come out and be honest with the parent. They were trying to sweep it all under the rug, just like this. But the Kingfisher deal is completely unacceptable. All of these people across the board, they all need to go. The community needs to come together and say, we're never going to allow a child in our community to ever experience anything like this. We as a community we're going to do a lot better than this.
Well, and I'm going to pull in another thing here. Just one second. So this is another thing that we're going to talk about next week when our visit author comes on. But this is the other problem that we're having too, is that we're having schools. And this is a pattern as well. And I'm sure, you know, she'll talk about it when she comes on, but this is a pattern as well. They'll find somebody who, and this person that she's writing about here, there's an audio of the person actually confessing to what he did to this boy.
Yeah.
And yet he was moved. There would be a complaint and they would fire him and he would just get hired at another school. And then there would be a complaint and they would fire him and he'd just get hired at another school. And again, I don't wonder if this is, well, if we make the allegation that he's a pedophile, is he going to, you know, come back and sue us, you know, for defamation of character? I just think that schools care more about their money. And I'm sorry, school, prove me wrong. I'm sure there are some out there that are not, you know, are not like that. But I do tend to think that what we see like this has to do with, I don't want to lose money. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to get sued. So I'm not going to walk out and stand up for the kids and start an investigation or whatever I need to do, because I don't want to get sued. Our school doesn't want to get sued. We don't want to get into a lawsuit. And I find it absolutely despicable that somehow any of this is more important than children.
Yeah.
Where are we today?
Well, and I'll go back.
Where are our values? Where are our morals? Where are any of these things?
Yeah. These child abusers, they're going to be where the kids are. And, you know, like it or not, they're going to be in your public school. That's where they're going to be.
Well, we're going to have to wind it up because we're over an hour here as it is. And but I did want to pull in one more thing before we get off of here today, and maybe even talking about a couple more things. But It's weird. I can't talk and operate things at the same time. So I put up a new blog yesterday. And I think it is a super important blog that people should read. Several months ago, and I don't even remember when this actually was that happened. I cut off the top, so I don't know exactly when this happened. But our former board member, longtime friend Julia C, was getting frustrated about the fact that we were hearing more and more complaints of parents whose kids were being groomed. There's no other way to say it. Groomed at public school, and they weren't being told about it. So that the kid might be using different pronouns, and the school isn't telling them. I mean, there's just and we're going to talk about that in week after next. We're going to talk about this specific thing. We've got some really good shows coming up, and you're going to want to make sure you stay tuned, because we're talking about stuff that other people aren't talking about. News media outlets aren't talking about this stuff. We're getting this stuff from parents and from teachers on the DL because they don't want to get found out. So you need to know, you need to pay attention, because we're bringing a bunch of this stuff to the forefront that isn't being talked about. And we have parents who have said that this is happening, that their kids are being, renamed at school, and they don't know about it. Julie got frustrated, and she was like, what if teachers secretly started baptizing kids at school and hid it from parents? What would that reaction be then?
Oh yeah, it'd be complete meltdown.
Well, so here's the title of the article: "A social media punking of leftists shows them to be not only extremely intolerant, but alarmingly anti-Christian." And so I literally took some of the I just screenshotted some of the, and think about it. I think when I took this screenshot, we had 513 comments. 34,000 people saw that particular post. It essentially went viral. And I mean, we had some just don't complain when I teach your kid to embrace the madness of Cthulhu, and then we've got these people. I mean, it's just to read some of the of the comments on this particular post were really absolutely unbelievable. And I think people who think to themselves, oh, hey, I got it made. I live in Oklahoma. We're a red state. We're in the middle of the Bible Belt, and I think these people, y'all need to wake up, because it's just not where we are anymore. And I think that it's really easy not to notice when you're not on social media, but I think social media is a really interesting microcosm of greater social and civil issues.
Yeah.
And if you're not on social media, you're probably not picking this stuff up, but you almost need to be, just because you get a really good education about where we are civilly in terms of society. So anyway, check out that article. rope2.org. You can see it right there, rope2.org, and you'll go to our homepage, and you can actually find out what we have up on Patreon. We do audio captures of our live feeds, and we put them up on our Patreon account, which you can join for only $8 a month, and we could use the support. And you'll also find a poll. We do a poll every week, and right now our poll is on dark money. And if you go to rope2.org, you can vote in that poll about dark money. Also, too, we'll have little shorts of the live videos that we have, so you can just kind of get a captcha of what we've done on our live video, and you can see that there. And then you can tune in to our live videos on our Rumble and our YouTube channels, because as soon as we go off live, they upload there, and you can see them in perpetuity. So take advantage of all the things that we have out there, because we do have ways to educate you, but you just have to take us up on those ways. But we do it so that you can.
All right. Sounds good. We need everybody's help. That's for sure.
Yeah, we do.
We're
And
volunteers.
next, yeah. Oh, and yeah, for sure. So next week, we've got a couple of good shows coming up that I can't remember off the top of my head, but don't forget that we have our rope regulars that we've signed up now. Representative Sherry Conley is going to be a rope regular. Our visit author is going to be a rope regular, and Carmen Greider, who is who ran for public office in Edmond, has been doing a lot of research on dark money, kind of parallel with mine, and has got a website that is just phenomenal. And every month she's going to come on and just bring up an elected leader or an issue and talk about that. And I think it's great. And so I think you guys need to really stick around and watch us for those rope regulars too. Anything else, Michael?
No, other than, we're responsible for our community. What happens in is our responsibility, whether it's this sexual abuse, violence like that, the library books, this bad curriculum, bad test scores, or I say bad test scores, way below proficiencies in reading and math and things like that. I mean, that's our responsibility as a parent, as a member of the community. It really falls back on us.
Well, it does. And I don't know that we can say it any more than we already say it. And we say it all the time, but until people actually decide that they're going to do it and get involved, I don't know, we've got to have people who are willing to get involved. There's just no way around it. So any excitement going on for the weekend for you?
No, nothing other than my other dealing with 5 kids going in 10 different directions. That's for sure.
Yeah, it is a tough one, but God bless you for doing it. Hey, you hang in there, Michael.
My contribution.
All right. Well, do what?
So it's my contribution to the world.
Okay, everybody have a great weekend. It's going to be cool and wet. I think we've passed the fake autumn now that comes up in Oklahoma, and we're now starting toward real fall. So have a nice, cool weekend, and we will see you again next Wednesday for Rope Report Live. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.